land on which this cemetery stands is the gift of the French people, the perpetual resting place of the sailors, soldiers and airmen who are honoured here.
Hello and welcome to Mr. Dilly's World of History. I'm Mr. Dilly. Today we'll be learning and exploring more about the events that happened in May and June in 1940 on the beaches of a town called Dunkirk in northern France in World War II. Shortly about welcoming my guest and co-presenter today, the award-winning children's author Tom Palmer, whose latest book, Angel of Grasmere, is set against the backdrop of the events of Dunkirk and conveys the devastating impact for both those who fought in that battle on the front lines and those who are left at home to worry and grieve. We also have interviews today with some Dunkirk veterans. We have some footage of the Battle of Dunkirk itself and lots of other there to kind of inspire your learning and educate you about this particular momentous event in our history. Welcome, Tom. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good, Mr. Dilly. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really, really good. Lovely to have you with us again. What we're going to do is, me and Tom are going to do, we're going to kind of go through chronologically the events that are kind of recounted in his book to sort of tell you a little bit more about where things were at the beginning of the war that led up to the events in his book and the aftermath of that in Grasmere itself. So before we sort of get into Dunkirk and what that is, why it's important, all that kind of stuff, your book begins in August 1940. So the events of Dunkirk have happened a couple of months before that. They took place in May and June 1940. Where do we find ourselves? You know, where are we and who are we with in terms of the children and the characters at the beginning of your book? I'll hand over to you to give us a bit of a background for that.
Thank you, Mr. Dilly. And thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. So it starts with three children climbing up a fell, kind of like a bit like the scenery there. So a fell, like in Cumbria, is a mountain or a big hill, and then it starts with particularly Tarn is the main girl who runs up the hill, and she's pretty angry because today is the day of her the memorial service for her brother, who she's been told has been killed at Dunkirk. She's also with Peter, her best friend, who is the son of a farmer in Grasmere, and also Eric, who is an evacuee from Manchester, and they're the three main characters that we start off with, and we see it through their eyes at the beginning. So
just to give a sense of where excuse me, we are in the world. So this is if you don't know, if you've never heard of Grasmere, it's the Grasmere. Let's have a look here. We've got a map here. You'll see Grasmere here with it's the red mark on the screen there. So that's in the Lake District, basically, a small town there. Is that right, Tom?
That's correct. Yeah, it's a lovely little, I suppose, more of a village, but it's just a lovely little place, and it's famous for gingerbread and for where Dorothy and William Wordsworth, the writers, were from, and it's just a beautiful place. And the valley that goes up from it up the fell towards the Tarn is called Easdale, and most of the action in England anyway is set there.
So I think you could. I actually might have some pictures of that valley and Grasmere just here. So is this the valley you're talking about here, just on the right there?
That is the valley, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I was up there camping up there a couple of nights ago, and it's just lovely. It's really peaceful and calm. But this is a story of war and loss, so the beauty and the tranquility is somewhat fractured for the main characters.
So these locations, without sort of giving too much away, these are all featured in your book. You mentioned and this is the famous gingerbread shop up there on the left.
That's correct.
What are these other locations we got here? I think one of them's just the village itself. What's the other two here, which are both?
Yes, you've got the churchyard, St Oswald's Church, and that's where Dorothy Wordsworth's grave is, and she's like a significant. She's not a character in the book, but the memory of her is important. And then you've got Sam Reed's bookshop there, which is in Grasmere, which is a wonderful independent bookshop, which I go shopping in there frequently, and it was there during the Second World War, so that's one of the settings as well. So I've tried to I've done a lot of research into the places like that were there in 1940, and I've made sure it's all accurate. And I've had help as well, which we'll come to that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. We've got a couple of questions actually for you, kind of linked to what we were saying before we sort of move on and then talk about the beginning of the war and the soldier character that runs throughout your book and the importance of that. So just a couple of school questions here. So Lamberhurst St Mary's Primary School, Tunbridge Wells. Where do you find the inspiration for the characters in your novels? And I suppose we could talk about all your novels, but as we're talking about Angel of Grasmere, I guess I'm asking as a part of that, why Grasmere, and then why the children in Grasmere, I suppose, kind of echoed that question.
Yeah, I mean, like the why Grasmere, because I love it there, and if I write a book set there, I get to go there a lot. It's the main reason. And also, like I work with the school there as well, and they help me a lot. And the main characters, Tarn is I needed a younger sister of a soldier who'd been away during the Second World War. And I did some research, and there was a girl who lived around there called Tarn at the time, because it is quite an unusual name. Peter is her young friend who lives on the farm, and he's kind of what I imagine my stepdad would have been like at that age, and he would have been roughly that age as well. So I've kind of based him loosely on him, because my stepdad was great. And then Eric is the evacuee from Manchester, and I've sort of based him. I've done a lot of research into evacuees who came to Grasmere, because it's away from the cities, away from bombing. And I did name him, although I'm a Leeds fan and although I'm not a huge fan of Eric Cantona. Eric was a popular name then, and so I've named him after there as a sort of a just
homage in a weird sort of way. So you just mentioned actually Grasmere School. We've got another quick question, then we're going to go on to talk about the beginning of the things that led to Dunkirk itself. So Edgegrove School in Watford, you collaborated with the children at Grasmere School for this book. In what ways did they help you?
In lots of ways. Like, so when I wrote after the war, a book 3 or 4 years ago, they helped me edit it. And this time I went to them at the beginning, because I'm setting a book where they live. I live 90 miles away in Halifax in Yorkshire, so I'm writing a book set in their village, and I want it to be authentic. So they helped me conceive the ideas, they helped me research it. We walked to all the settings, so to help describe and see what they thought of those settings. Then I wrote the first draft, and they edited it. They also helped edit a second draft, and then they helped me promote it as well. So we had a big sort of promotional event on Tuesday this week. So they've helped me all the way through. And like, for me, that's wonderful, because I get these children from that area and their family stories coming in, informing the story. And so they are helping me enormously. But for them as well, I suppose, they're working with an author, aren't they? And they're seeing the process of writing.
Which is amazing. I didn't realize they help you so much. That's fascinating to know that. That's incredible. That's incredible. Okay, look, we're going to sort of move on. So keep in mind those characters. So Tom, Peter, and Eric, we're obviously going to be talking about them again later on. We sort of return to Grasmere. We're going to sort of jump across the waters now to the events in France, and which was happening in 1939 into 1940. So Tarn's brother is the first to enlist in their village in Grasmere, and he's sent to France with the British Expeditionary Force, the BEF, basically what becomes the British Army in that sense. Tell us any more about anything else you know more about the sort of the BEF at that particular point, and where things were at with the British Army at that stage?
Yeah, so when the war broke out, men had already volunteered to fight, and there was an existing army, but men had signed up to fight in the Second World War. And the BEF, the British Expeditionary Force, was the first sort of part of the British Army that went over to France to help defend France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, sort of against, although that wasn't expected, against Nazi invasion. And for initially, very little happened, because it was triggered by Germany invading Poland, and very little happened, although everybody knew it was going to happen. It was called the Phony War. And so the British Expeditionary Force, and in this book, they're marching through France into Belgium to help defend those countries against the Nazis, and then it all goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, because it could basically say like Germany invades Poland, as you said, 1st of September 1939. 2 days later, on the 3rd of September, Britain and France declare war on Germany. And the day after, on the 4th of September, is when the first load of the BEF go across to France. And on that first bit, I think by the end of that September, about 152,000 British soldiers have gone over there, and about 21,000 vehicles, including tanks, armored cars, all the rest of it, had gone on there. And a majority of them, as far as I'm aware, they go to sort of reinforce with the sort of French and Belgian troops along the sort of Belgian sort of French border. They also go and sort of, I think they take it in turn to this, to reinforce something called the Maginot Line. We're going to come back to that, what that is actually is in a minute, because that's an important part of what kind of led to the events of Dunkirk. As you said, Tom, so there's a few minor clashes going on. They go over there September, but by the time we get to April, apart from these little minor clashes, nothing much has happened. But then the Nazis invade Denmark and Norway, so that's underway, and they know the Netherlands, Belgium are next. 10th of May, 4:35 a.m. in the morning, the German invasion of France begins. So we mentioned the Maginot Line. What was that? Oh, I've got a couple of pictures as well. And why is that important in terms of the events that then led to what happened on the beaches of Dunkirk? Can I hand over to you for that a little bit?
Yeah, so like the Maginot Line was like defensive positions, wasn't it, of the French defensive positions, and the Germans invaded, and they did what I believe, like the word blitzkrieg was used for that as well, lightning war. Although blitz is related to the bombing of London as well, isn't it? But they came very fast, and they came through. Was it the Ardennes woods, wasn't it?
That's it. Yeah. Well, I've got a picture. Let me show you. I've got a picture of. So let me show you. So this is like the sort of thing that the French were. So in the 1930s, as Tom said, is that things are going on in Germany. They knew there was going to be some other conflict of some sort. So along their border there, you can see what they built. So that big solid red line is this. I think it's 280 miles long, and it's sort of concrete fortifications, it's obstacles, weapons installations built by France to defend that border against Germany. As Tom said, the top section there runs through a forest called the Ardennes, and it's kind of really rocky, rugged kind of landscape. And so the fortifications along the Maginot Line were really heavily protected. However, as it goes to those little dotted lines there, you can see on that map there, it was a lot weaker there. So what did the fact that it sort of was weaker there, I think it was to do with, I mean, you'll probably know more about this than I do, because of the fact that it was in the Ardennes forest. They just thought they wouldn't get through there. They just thought
they didn't think they'd get through it, but they had the technology, they had the tanks, and they just burst through, didn't they? I've never seen that picture of the fortifications.
It's quite. I mean, it's just to see what was there. I mean, it's remarkable. So these gun turrets were kind of like all placed all the way along there, in order to kind of to do that. So as it said,
they stormed through there, and it led to like it. And I describe that in this book, and it's like I describe how the soldiers, the British soldiers, I like go through France and they're celebrated, like the French celebrate them in the villages very similar to where some of the characters are from, and they're given flowers, and like people are like all over them, and then they have to retreat because the Germans are advancing with such force. They have to retreat, and then they're going through these shattered villages, and the people shout at them, cowards, that why are you leaving us? And they're like, this stuck. I've listened to loads of testimony of soldiers who took part in this. This stuck being shouted at, being called cowards. Was it de lâche? I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but and that's a big part of the mental torture for all those men who had to retreat very quickly towards Dunkirk because the Germans were just overpowered the British and French armies.
It was like a blitzkrieg. I've got a picture. I think this is the sort of what became known as Battle of France. But you can see that, so the red lines here, so May 1940, you can see the Germans come in. So all those red arrows are where the Germans are advancing straight in. And as you said, that bottom red arrow is where they sort of got through the Ardennes forest. They completely overpowered there. And I think as far as I'm aware, because the French and the British, I think, didn't think that the Germans would be able to get through there, They didn't have I don't know if they had any anti-tank weapons and stuff like that to get rid of the advancing Germans. So they made a really swift move. What happens next is, obviously, as Tom said, the forces, French as well, and the British are retreating, and they're being pushed back towards the English Channel. And they've got to get to a port. The only way they can do it is get off the island. But as far as I'm aware, the Germans are coming in and then start bombing all the ports, don't they? Boulogne and all the rest of it, and they're bombing all the ports. And it's that pushes all the soldiers, and a character in your book who is one of the Dunkirk soldiers, to the beaches of Dunkirk as well. So tell me what. So you just said to him, he's one of, in your book, your character, he's one of these retreating soldiers, and you just said kind of what sort of happens to him when he gets there. Just to show a quick map, just so people know where Dunkirk actually is. So you can see Dunkirk there on the northern coast of France, and you can see Britain there, Dover. Do you know how far that is across there by boat, Tom?
I don't. It looks about 40 to 45 miles, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not very far, and that's
25
the kind of
Calais, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's it. So the BEF retreat, and they're going to Dunkirk. Tom's going to give you a little reading in a minute. I'll tell you what we do, Tom. I've got a couple of questions for you. Then we go to a little reading from that. It gives you kind of an idea that for that. So this is to do with your kind of research, really, because I know we're going to be talking about that a bit more later on. St. John Fisher's Catholic College, Newcastle. Did you go to Dunkirk as part of the research? We're going to see the answer to that in a minute. But yeah, just tell us quickly a bit about that.
Yes, I always try to go to the places that I'm writing about, if I possibly can, just to get the feel for a place, and to actually go to the beaches where hundreds of thousands of soldiers, British and French, were surrounded, and they had to go onto those beaches, and just stand on. It's a lovely beach, there's people walking the dogs. You'll see them in a bit, and and it's a holiday place. It's lovely, but this was a horrendous, frightening place, and to stand there kind of in the evening when everyone else has gone and remember what happened there. It's really important for me when I'm writing a book to get a feel of a place, in the same way that when I wrote After the War, which includes a small amount in the concentration camps, even though I didn't describe 99% of what I saw in the concentration camps, it was worth going there just to understand it, so that I've got a greater understanding with all the other research that I do. So setting, and also describing it, describing the light, all the aspects of a place, even though it's 80 plus years ago.
So you just need that. It kind of, I suppose, it gets into you as well, and then it kind of informs your storytelling and makes it sort of more real for you. And so
you're less likely to make a mistake, I suppose. Even though I don't use 90% of what I gather, you're less likely to make an error which would be wrong.
And I suppose you can see it then more through the people's eyes as much as you can, I suppose, whatever, if they're a soldier, a child, wherever it is. Okay, we're going to go through a little reading for you now. So Tom's going to give us a little reading, and I think this reading is about that, the BEF marching in as heroes, and then the German tanks break through, and then kind of what happens after that. So we okay to do that? I think it's page 55, 59, that sort of reading. So I'll hand over to you, Tom, for a quick reading, and then we've got a little video of you on the beach there as well. So there we go. I'll hand over to you for that.
Thank you. The man and the other soldiers marching through one of the sunny little villages they were there to protect. A pretty schoolhouse, a small church, a boulangerie handing out warm loaves to the soldiers, and locals throwing flowers too. Children saluting with serious little faces. The British Army were heroes to these people, marching in to defeat the Germans. But soon after leaving the village behind, they had heard the rumble and roar of machines, louder and louder, German tanks. Then they heard the tanks firing, not at them, but over their heads. Next, they saw the tanks coming towards them, and as it was clear they were completely outnumbered, they were given orders to retreat. They returned through the village of saluting children, the flowers now strewn on the road, through smoke and fire billowing from the church and the schoolhouse, hit by tank shells. The people who had cheered now stared at them in horror. The British Army was abandoning them. Already the people of the village were leaving, escaping. The roads on the other side of the village were chaos, crowded with civilians, men and women wheeling prams and bicycles and carts with everything they owned stacked onto them, dragging animals behind them, children crying as they walked. So many people that the soldiers were ordered to march parallel through the fields. A vibration in the air became a hum, then a roar. An enemy plane coming in low and Messerschmitt. The refugees had scattered, some managing to escape while others were gunned down. Horses pulling carts were mown down, ripped apart by shrapnel. All the man could hear as the noise of the planes faded was the screaming of children, women, old people. He and the other men were ordered to leave the refugees. They had to walk away, abandoning the French civilians to their fate. Des lâches, the villagers were screaming, des lâches, cowards. And that, unfortunately, is all based on the testimony of men who were there in the British Army and of French civilians who were part of that experience. And the Germans, that was part of their strategy, was to terrify everybody, and they would target and kill hundreds of civilians just to make it chaos and make it difficult for the British Army to retreat. It's horrific.
Well, let's just show, we've got a tiny clip, it's only 30 seconds. It's actually you on Dunkirk beach recently. Then we've got a short video, which actually it's a map, but it shows the rapid advance of the German army. And it's quite scary, actually. It's only a map, but it's quite incredible how quick it advanced. So this is just Tom on Dunkirk beach, showing you what it looks like today. Here we go.
So this beach is Dunkirk, and it's where a part of my book, Angel of Grasmere, is set. And this is Dunkirk. It's a lovely beach. It's a seaside place. There's restaurants and cafes. It's really nice. It's a really nice place to be. But in 1940, May, June, it was a horrific place where hundreds of thousands of soldiers were trapped. British and French soldiers were trapped here. The Germans had encircled Dunkirk, and the mass of the British and French army were trapped here. It's this lovely beach. Was a horrifically frightening place to be.
So it's just that's the beach now, and Tom there, and we've got some other stuff from you, Tom, recording on the beach there later on. I just want to show that little video now. This is from Maps in a Nutshell from YouTube, and it's the Battle of Dunkirk itself. What you're going to see on this video here, in the top right corner, you'll see the date of the German advancement as it goes through, and then you'll see the numbers, the increasing number of Nazis and Germans, and the decreasing numbers of allies. So some of them are being captured, some of them being killed, and some of them are escaping. Also on there, you're going to hear two voices on there. One of them is of Adolf Hitler himself, and the other one is of Winston Churchill. When these events happened, Winston Churchill had only been Prime Minister for 16 days, which is an incredible thing. And a part of this you'll hear is his famous response to what happened on the beaches of Dunkirk, and the famous "We will fight them on the beaches" speech he did to the House of Commons. So this is about a minute long. It's quite loud, so it might be a bit louder than we're speaking now, but here we go.
Meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt deine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
L'Est français a été causé par la force mécanique, aérienne et terrestre de l'ennemi.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Incredibly powerful, that just seeing your country invaded and the fear, as Tom spoke about, and what was happening to those soldiers then. We're going to speak to Tom again in a minute and bring him back live in a minute. First, there's a couple of videos I'd like to show you. One is actually of Tom back on Dunkirk beach, but the first is one of the Dunkirk veterans. far as I'm aware, there isn't any Dunkirk veterans alive anymore. I stand to be corrected on that. But I do have some footage of some interviews that will be shown throughout the program today, which was recorded back in sort of 2017, 2018. The first one is a wonderful man called Alfred Thomas Smith. As I said, this was recorded in 2018. And he speaks about what it was like for him on the beaches at Dunkirk. So over to Alfred now. Here we go.
My name is Alfred Thomas Smith. I'm 98 years of age. I was in the Royal Army Service Corps. And I sat on the beach. No food, no water, for 48 hours. Soldiers just sitting on the beach because there was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, completely flat beach. And you just sat there, ships were coming in, getting sunk by German bombers. And you just sat there and hoped that you got away with it. Now, our company was 107 strong, and just 31 of us got back over 107. One of the worst things was a friend of mine, he was a Lance Corporal, and he got hit by some shrapnel from a bomb. Thankfully for him, he died almost instantly, but it was terrible sights. I remember wading out up to my neck in water, still a few yards to go, so I swam for just a few yards. They had ropes hanging down from the ship. I got hold of a rope, was hauled on board. Next thing, I passed out.
It's always quite something, isn't it, seeing people actually talk about it, and it really brings it to life. Thank you for Alfred Thomas Smith there and his family for that footage, and Forces News for letting us use that. We're going to return to the beach of Dunkirk now with some footage of Tom, and he'll be speaking about his character in Angel of Grasmere, his soldier character, as he recalls the events of Dunkirk. And then we're back live with Tom itself. This is back to Tom, and he's going to give us a reading from the beach as well. Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Dilly. So, we're back in Dunkirk now, and I wanted to read a really short bit from Angel of Grasmere. One of the main characters in Angel of Grasmere is this soldier here, and he's been through Dunkirk, and he's living in Grasmere now, and he's having terrible flashbacks, terrible trauma flashbacks to what happened to him when he was at Dunkirk, and it kind of explains his behaviour and the motivation for what he does in the story. So I'm just going to read you a short bit about what this soldier character goes through. So, some days he went from dawn to dusk without being troubled by the terrible flashbacks, but he lived in fear of them coming again, of seeing something and feeling as if he was losing his mind. A sudden sight or sound that would cause a surge of adrenaline as another memory was triggered. Like the morning in late autumn, with a heavy frost, so heavy that the fells were white when he saw a line of soldiers training on the fells. And that was it. He was back in France. He remembered marching in a line with the other soldiers from his unit as they abandoned the French villages and headed toward the coast, to a town they found burning, Dunkirk. There were more lines of soldiers there on the beach, stretching as far as the eye could see, thousands and thousands of men behind them as fires raged through Dunkirk. Buildings had collapsed and a thick black smoke was gushing skyward, probably from a burning oil storage depot. He had stood there in one of the lines with the other men from his battalion, waiting for hours coming to take them off the beach, and over to the huge troop ships that had arrived to take them home. But there were many enemy aeroplanes coming from above here too, spraying the beach with machine gun fire, forcing him and the other men to scramble out of their lines and run for the dunes and waves as a rush of bullets streaked up the sand. The man remembered running for cover, throwing himself on the dunes, hands over his eyes and ears, like he was doing now, like he always did when the memories were triggered, collapsing, cowering, thrashing, twitching and cramping on the side of the fell. Back on the beach, when the planes had screamed away again and he opened his eyes, there had been bodies lying next to him in the dunes and floating in the sea, dead. And now it felt like they were there next to him on the fell, bleeding into the soil, bobbing in the tarn water. So he kept his eyes screwed tight shut until the memories went away. So I researched that a lot. I listened to the voices of lots of men who were here on this beach who survived Dunkirk, and I looked at lots of photographs, and I read other accounts and books, and I've watched the film Dunkirk as well, both films called Dunkirk, but actually coming here and reading that is quite, I don't know, I'm writing this story about these terrible things that happened right where we sat. It talks about dunes, and here we are with dunes, and it's difficult. But for now, I'll hand you back to Mr. Dilly.
So you can see from Tom's reading there just how desperate the situation was on that beach. The Allies set up defensive positions all around Dunkirk, and they fight with everything they've got to try and repel attack after attack after attack of Nazi soldiers, tanks and planes. The Luftwaffe bombers and fighter planes are barrage bombing them, their defensive positions, annihilating the Allies' defensive and soldiers. So the only hope they have is to get the soldiers across the channel and to regroup in Britain. But it will take literally a miracle to get that many men across before the Nazis breach the defences of Dunkirk. So we'll speak about that in a moment. I'm going to bring Tom back to get his reaction and thoughts about those last couple of videos, and also we've got a couple more questions for Tom from you as well. So welcome back, Tom. Any thoughts about what you spoke about, also what Alfred spoke about in his video as well?
Just hearing Alfred speak just makes me realize how important it is that when you're studying or writing something like this, is to go as close to history as you can, and that's to go to what's called a primary source. So it's like the first source of what we know about history, or the testimony, the words of the person who was there, and everything that you build, like when you're writing a story about that, you build around the testimony of those, because once you use secondary or like later sort of sources, then it becomes corrupted. So like hearing from the veterans is and the civilians who lived in the area is really important, and also like I find it deeply moving as well, and that's part of what we're looking at, isn't it?
It is. I mean, that kind of ties into another question from Cardinal Newman School in Hove. Hello, Hove. I'm just down the road from you, so hello, Hove. What is the best method of research when you're writing a book? If it is a historic story, does it help visiting the location? You kind of already answered that, in the sense that, you know, it does. Anything you want to add to their particular question? I think you kind of answered it, but anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, everything. I mean, it's like finding written accounts, finding the footage like you shown us of veterans, going to the places. There's a museum in Dunkirk as well you can visit, and it's quite a quirky museum, but it's got the uniforms, and it's got details you wouldn't know from reading a book or even from watching a film that you can study, and it's just immersing yourself in the subject, writing loads of notes, and then starting to piece together the important bits to tell the story. So the research is very, for me, it's really broad, so that I don't miss anything, or I miss, fewer things than I would have if I'm not.
Yeah. So again, I suppose he just gets into, doesn't he? He's got much more to draw on, then he make these links and stuff in terms of that.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to sort of carry on the sort of timeline now, where things are at. So troops are at Dunkirk, being bombed by the Germans. The defences are just holding, but just for now. And then something called Operation Dynamo commences. So what is Operation Dynamo? Because it's quite a big deal. So tell us what Operation Dynamo is, because obviously your character in Angel of Grasmere, he's part of that. He's on these beaches, and he's going across well, tell us what happens. I'll go hand over to you.
So there's hundreds, something like 350,000-ish men on the beach. Dunkirk is being defended by other sort of army, British and French army units, so that these men have got a few days, like if they don't get bombed from above, to get off the beaches. But the big ships off the beaches can't come close enough to pick the men up. So we needed lots of little ships to ferry the men to the big ships out at sea. And so Operation Dynamo was the bringing of hundreds, something like 600, though I might stand to be corrected, as on that ship, little boats that came over, like little ferries, little fishing boats that came over from England, and like civilians, you know, people who hadn't been trained for war, who were being dive bombed, and they came over and to the theatre of war, as it's called, as civilians, and ferried those men off the beaches and took them to the big ships, and sometimes took them right back to the country. And like this like, was it sort of roughly 300,000 men were rescued in this way. If they had not, if those little ships of like normal, you know, civilian people from England had not come across, many of those 300,000 men would have been killed, and if not, been made prisoners of war, and there'd have been nothing left of an army to attack.
I think the incredible thing about it, and I think, you know, when you look at history, is that you realise it's like how things literally just on a knife edge, you know. Yeah. And as Tom sort of said, is that had the Nazis had breached those defences, and they had a couple of other things happen as well. I'm going to the various reasons Hitler stopped. They paused their attack, and there's various reasons for that. They also had weather, very low lying cloud, which stopped some of the bombardments of some of the German planes shooting all our boys up on the beaches and on the boats and stuff. But if that not happened, the army would have gone, and the Allies would have that would have been the turning point for the war. And it's pretty much without saying, we would have lost the war at that point. We'd have had no army, and so the Allies and the kind of the base it then future gives to the Americans to come over and would have gone. So this battle was massive, wasn't it? It was a huge turning point in the war for that. You mentioned about these small ships. We're going to go back to I think it's back to the beach again. There's a reading from Tom's book now about this miracle of Dunkirk, which, as Tom said, is all these little boats coming over, civilians as well as army military vehicles coming over to get the soldiers off the beach over here. So I'm going to hand over to Tom on the video now to do this and give us a little reading.
After waiting for hours on the beach, through a sunrise, a sunset and another sunrise, watching hundreds of men board fishing boats, cruisers and small ferries, the man remembered helping the more badly injured men wade out into the shallow waters and onto a fishing boat. And just bear in mind, like these normal people in their normal boats, their fishing boats and cruisers, they were under fire from the Nazis, like aeroplanes coming out of the sky, bombs, you know, shells flying over from over there, like from inland. It's just unbelievable what happened here 84 years ago. He was the last to climb aboard and felt glad that he'd been able to help. The fishing boat was from Kent, and 20 men piled onto it before it chugged away from the beach and towards the huge ships waiting on the horizon. Battleships, troop ships, converted sea ferries. It seemed everything that could float had left the islands of Great Britain to come to the rescue of its defeated army. As the memories came back to him, the man tried not to think of the sound of aeroplanes in the skies that day, Messerschmitts strafing the small ships with machine gun fire, Stuka dive bombers, the Stukas dive bombing the bigger ships with that terrible scream coming from the sirens attached to their undercarriage. He and the other men cowering, so overcome by weeks of war that they could do nothing but tremble and hide their faces. He tried not to think of the cowards he and the British Army had been, retreating and leaving Dunkirk to burn, but of the heroes, because there were many that day. The heroes were the fishermen from Kent, the ferrymen from Cornwall, the boat owners from the Thames estuary, the hundreds of civilians who had sailed their ships through the Terror and across the Channel to help. So what I wanted to do by reading that bit was just pay tribute. Obviously we've remembered the soldiers and the sailors and the airmen who took part in that action, but the civilians who were there, hundreds of ships, little ships, came over here. It was an astonishing thing, and yes, it was a miracle, and yes, it is really moving, and yes, it is really important, because that rescue of those hundreds of thousands of men not only saved all those men's lives, but it's sort of with the help of Churchill's speech, where he talks about we'll fight them on the beaches, fight them in the hills, etc. That was a turning point in the war in some ways, an important thing to mark. And to do it on this beach is really important for me as someone who's written a story about all of this. Back to you, Mr. Dilly.
Yeah, thanks. Just to quickly do, I've got another interview with a veteran coming up in a minute, Tom. But what was it actually like being on that beach? What does it feel like?
So I went there to make videos, and I went there like all organized, like this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to talk about, this is what I'm going to read, and I was like, in control. And then that's sort of swept away in a way, like that, like the tide sweeping stuff away, because you're in that place where those things happened, and I was feeling those emotions. But I mean, yeah, but that's part of it, isn't it? That's part of it. You're like those emotions just give you more respect for the people who went through those terrible things, and the stress and strain of it, and the impact it must have had on them for the rest of their lives.
And we're gonna talk actually about that impact, because that's actually another theme of your book, about the impact on soldiers, not just from Dunkirk, of course, but across the whole war and all wars. In fact, your character, Tom's brother, he's on the retreat. He gets on the boat to sort of come back, and the boats, as you saw on the map earlier, come into Dover, which is an important thing. I just got a short clip of another veteran, and he was I can't explain it better than I will, but he was working at Dover for the army, and they had all the World War II operations that sort of underneath Dover Castle. And he's also speaking about Dunkirk and the miracle of the little ships as well. So I'm just going to hand over to a man called Benjamin Richard Sheen, a Dunkirk veteran, who's no longer with us, telling you a bit more about that before we carry on with Tom. Here we go.
I'm Benjamin Richard Sheen, member of the Royal Corps of Signals. I served for 6.5 years, 2.5 years in Dover, where I was 20 years old. There was a small detachment in Dover Castle. We worked in the gun control room there, 70 feet below the castle. When the Germans first took over France and the northern coast, they actually had an easy run through. Consequently, our army, 400,000 men, were trapped in Dunkirk. The problem was there was only a small jetty. They were able to get some of the men, but obviously being the large ships, they couldn't get into the beach. Operation Dynamo was, I think, one of the main epics of the war, and I think it was certainly a turning point. I happened to be with a couple of the chaps walking along the front of Dover, and it was a very quiet, peaceful sort of evening. The sea was like a mill pond, and we could literally hear the battle going on. You could hear the explosions, you could hear the shells being fired. We were saying, things are getting pretty close. Well, the few days after, I could hear quite a lot of noise, and I got up to look out the window. It was almost like magic, and the whole harbour was full of little ships, and they were manned by elderly men, boys, but at least they were able to get onto the beaches in Dunkirk and transport the soldiers onto the larger ships. Quite astonishing, really. But of course, all the time they were being dive-bombed by these Junkers 87s. We went down to helping the soldiers off the ships. Churchill wanted to get them away as soon as possible, so they were off the ships, straight on the trains and away, because they were afraid that, if the Germans didn't get them in Dunkirk, they'd get them in Dover or Folkestone or somewhere like that. They reckon 1 out of 4 was left behind, but in all they rescued 388,000 soldiers. Without that army that was saved, we were virtually devoid of any sort of defence.
And thanks to Benjamin Sheen there and English Heritage for use of that video. So your character, sorry, Tom, you're going to say something. It's quite affecting, that, isn't it? I mean, it's really is, quite something. You have anything to say about that? Because quite something.
Just extraordinary and well found, and that's very powerful.
It's very, very powerful. For all you children watching and all the rest of it, there's no shying away from that. This is war we're talking about, and so and it's people's lives. So there's no sort of disguising, how affecting it all is. Your character in Angel of Grasmere, he ends up in Grasmere via Dover. You said what he was kind of feeling like. He was feeling like a coward, as a lot of them were feeling. But when they actually got here, they actually didn't get a coward's welcome at all, did they? What happened when they actually arrived?
They were they were up to sorry, they were welcomed, like, and they were cheered in the streets, and there was people giving them tea and oranges and cake and scones and like feeding them and just welcoming them back. And then like that they were offered like that the local people could write home to their families to tell them they're safe. It was just a warm, they were celebrated as heroes, and that, like, for a lot of the ones that I read, they didn't want to be celebrated as heroes. They felt like quite the opposite, and it was quite conflicting for them.
So they got back. He ends up in Grasmere. So before we sort of go back about that again, let's jump back to where we were at the beginning of the program today. You mentioned your child characters, which of course are the actual main characters through the book, and it's these events of the soldier character and Dunkirk that kind of inform all their lives. This is Tom, Peter, and Eric. You across the book, it's amazing. You really bring the effects of war on a rural community to life. It's quite staggering, and all the things in some way which you see from the map earlier in Grasmere, you think, oh, that's sort of out of the war. Let's focus on the cities, but the effects of that. Can you tell us a bit about what are your characters? What are they seeing? What are they experiencing? What's going on in where they live at this particular period?
Well, I wanted to understand like what was it like in rural communities, particularly here. So when I write a book, I do a scrapbook, and you can see this on my website on the page for this book. And I just went through like the local newspapers, and like in the local newspapers there'd be pictures of silhouettes of aeroplanes to warn them about what the aeroplanes, whether they were like friendly or enemy aeroplanes, because planes were coming over bombing. And then there was other like articles, like pictures of men who didn't make it back. So the local newspaper, before, like decades before the internet, like the local newspaper told you lots of stuff, but they would like lots of other things would be happening. All the signposts would be removed because there was a genuine fear that the Germans would parachute in or somehow like invade via the hills. Churchill said, we'll fight them in the hills. And that was a genuine fear. Farmers were asked to put farm machinery or boulders or something in their larger fields so that the Germans couldn't land on them in gliders. And this was right in the northwest of the country, not the southeast where Dover was. It was right in the northwest of England. Anyway, and so there was loads of preparation for war. And then their village, like there was schools that like come from places like Newcastle and set up in a hotel in the village that they were from, a whole school full of children. The army like was training people, and soldiers were billeted in Grasmere. So it was everywhere. And then obviously there was all the other things like rationing, and then people just losing members of their family, getting the telegram, your son is dead, and this happening all over the valley and all over the country. It affected them hugely. Obviously.
I think that's the thing. There's one of the amazing things about your book, and I just said before you started talking there, is that we think of the wars and we think of the Blitz, which of course later on, that's still to come. The Blitz hasn't happened yet, and we think of the effect on the cities, but obviously towns and other places were also bombed as well. And you even in this book, you see the children. As you said, Eric's evacuated from Manchester. Is that right?
Yes.
And he hears about Manchester being evacuated, Liverpool being bombed. And then they see Barrow, which is obviously a lot closer to them. They actually see the German planes going over, don't they? Sort of bombing.
They back. Do, and sometimes the German planes flew over, bombed Barrow, and they'd come over Grasmere, and occasionally they'd drop their bombs to get away quickly and away from the British planes that were. And this was a house called the Cooper House, which was a farmhouse. That some bombs were dropped randomly from the aeroplanes just to get rid of them, so they could fly back to Germany more rapidly. And one fell on this farmhouse, the Cooper House near Kendal, and killed 11 people. So it was everywhere, and it infiltrated every part of their lives.
And what's amazing, you said again, and it's really kind of in the book. And again, you just sort of like. Living, as I said, this is set 2 months after Dunkirk, as you said at the beginning. So they know that Germany have Europe now. They have control of Europe, and they're just across the water. I don't know what the narrowest strip is between England and France. It's something like 20 odd miles, isn't it? It's like 25 miles or something. So that's where they are. So that threat of invasion is permanently there in their mind.
And it wasn't just they assumed it was going to happen. Will it, won't it? They kind of knew. So it wasn't like they were thinking, will it, won't it? They knew it was going to happen. It didn't in the end, but they knew that they were going to be invaded.
There's a line when he sort of says, what's going to happen to all of us? I think one of your characters
exactly.
says. And if you don't realize how real this is, and this is quite a frightening thing, I'll just show you this map here. So this is Operation Sea Line. So these are the German plans to invade England. You see on the map there on the left, and obviously the whole of the Britain eventually. You see the Germans coming in. This map on the right, I don't know if you can see it clearly there. It's quite blurred, but there's Eastbourne down there and Bexhill on Sea. So this was day one of the German invasion of England, Operation Sea Line. So that was a real threat that was kind of in their minds. This is what's going to happen kind of next. We've got another question for you, Tom, which kind of links to some of the things you've been speaking about. All the things you've been speaking about, really. So Southmere Primary, Bradford. What has inspired you to write novels with World War II as a central thing? I know you've also done World War I as well, but obviously mainly World War II, and you've obviously got quite a wedge of them now. So what kind of drives you to do these stories, to write these stories?
I'm fascinated in it. And like there's endless stories to do with it, and I'm really fascinated in them. But I'm also interested in war and what it does to civilians and people in the forces. And it's the Second World War is studied a lot in schools, and so I am writing books about conflicts that I studied universally in schools, but I'm not just writing about the Second World War. The things that you read about in here and in Resist and in the other books, they're happening in similar ways in countries right now. There are wars across the world, and I want to write about how civilians are impacted, how families who have men and women who go into the front line, Ukraine, etc., and it's so important for us to understand. And when I'm researching these books, I read and look at accounts of what is happening now, and the parallels between them are so close. And that's so. Although I'm writing about the Second World War, I'm writing anti-war books. I do not. And we do not celebrate. We are not here to celebrate and glorify war. We're here to understand it and do anything we can to sort of prevent it, because it's appalling.
Well, in fact, what you say there, and this is if anyone's ever, if you read this book and if you read any of Tom's books, is that what runs right through all your books is a fact. In fact, what is hope and kindness and courage, and people helping each other against these incredible backdrops. So they are definitely anti-war books. They're definitely about sort of like, highlighting the better side of human nature that exists within these awful kind of situations. Just going to another quick question. You sort of answered again, and then we're going to go to a video of you on Easdale Tarn in Grasmere and talk a little bit more about that. So Sandy Moore Ormiston Academy, Cheshire. How much responsibility do you feel as an author when writing historical fiction to ensure that your books are as authentic as possible?
A massive responsibility. The first, and it's a really good question, as they all are, thank you. The first proper war history book I did was Over the Line, and I remember there was a character in it called Sid Wheelhouse, who was a Grimsby Town player who went to fight in the First World War. And while I was writing it, in the process of it, I went to his grave. And I stood at his grave in the area where he had been killed, and I realized I had this epiphany, this moment that I realized that I'd kind of used him as a character and created this drama about he was a big, strong footballer and he ends up dying in a gas attack and dead, and isn't that pathetic and sad? And I realized standing there at his grave that I had a duty to him to tell his story properly, as I have a duty to everybody whose story from the Holocaust to the First World War, Second World War, and you have a duty to these. And authentic is the perfect word. It has to be authentic, because there are books out there about war for children that distort what happened so much, it is inauthentic, and it's wrong to do that to the people. So I do my absolute utmost to achieve that.
And that comes across in all your books. We're going to go for another video on Easdale Tarn. And this is, well, we'll show the video and then we can just talk a little bit more about that. So let's just go to quick video. So this is now, we're in Grasmere, and Easdale Tarn is just well, I don't know how far it is from Grasmere. How far is Easdale Tarn from actual Grasmere?
A couple of miles, but it's very steep.
Couple of miles, very, very steep. So this is Tom, and in this we're speaking about something called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which we kind of touched on earlier on. So this is Tom at Easdale Tarn.
Thank you, Mr. Dilly. So this is Easdale Tarn in the Lake District, and this is where Angel of Grasmere, a lot of the action is set. Because up by Easdale Tarn during the Second World War, in my story, there is a man, and he's hiding up here. In fact, if you look over there to that large rock over there where those people are walking, that used to be a wall it used to be a wall that was part of the hut, a refreshment hut, which used to be up here on the lake. And for me, like coming up here and being where that refreshment hut was is really helpful for me, because my character in the book, he hides in that refreshment hut during the war because he's been to war. He's been at Dunkirk, which we've been talking about, and he's really stressed, really messed up. He's got post-traumatic stress disorder, and he can't face war. He can't even face his family. He can't. He just needs to hide up here in the mountains. So for me, coming here to see that rock, to be in this place, really helps me understand what his mentality must have been like. Helps me get into the character, as well as going to Dunkirk and seeing what the beaches were like. And another thing which I've found really useful is when I write a book, I often try to get an artifact, something from history, that brings me close to what I'm writing about. And in this case, this is an entrenching tool, and it would have been used during the Second World War to dig trenches, to hide from incoming fire, to make a foxhole, to even sleep in during the night, or also in hand-to-hand combat. So an object like this would have been like vital, to a soldier during the Second World War, and at Dunkirk if you wanted to dig a hole very, very quickly. And having this object, my character in the story has this object, and he uses it at the beginning of the story. Having this object makes me feel a lot closer to my character when I'm trying to write him, and hopefully makes me write him better, because I wanted to capture what would it be like if you were a soldier who was a deserter. What would it be like if you had post-traumatic stress disorder, and how, having never experienced those things myself, having read about them, just coming to this place and having an object like that helps me to write it more effectively, hopefully. Anyway, thank you for listening, and back to you, Mr. Dilly.
So Tom, at Easdale Tarn. So in that video, Tom, we mentioned PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder and stuff. There's a little reading, I think it's page 10 to 12 of your book, where you kind of like encapsulate a moment there actually in your book actually on that Tarn and your character and what he deals with. So just gonna hand over to Tom now. So just a short reading that kind of bring that place to life back in 1940. So I hand over to you, Tom, for that.
Thank you. He had spent most of the day lower down the valley watching the harvest. Women, children and men bringing in the sheaves. Everyone helping each other. And for a few minutes, he'd relaxed, enjoying the sweet smell of the cut grass wafting up the fell sides, the sun on his skin. But this sense of peace hadn't lasted long. It was replaced quickly by guilt for not helping with the harvest, for doing nothing, for being nothing. Now, back high on the fell, he tentatively put his head up through the bracken. He saw the three children stop suddenly, and even though they were so far away, he noticed that they were pointing. Then he heard the noise, the roar, saw the aeroplane, and his legs buckled underneath him, dumping him down into his bracken tunnel on his backside. He felt his knees reflex up to his chest, his arms snapped tight around his head, and he heard himself cry out. The noise of the plane and the sight of it had taken him back to France, to war. Once he was over his initial shock, he scrambled on all fours, wanting to get away from the stone hut, the only building on the fell. Could that be a bombing target? Still, under the cover of the bracken, he pulled a length of wood and what looked like a small shovel from a brown pouch, attaching the wood to the handle. To the shovel to assemble his entrenching tool. He began to hack at the earth, creating a shell scrape or shallow trench where he lay, his face pressed into the soil. He stayed there even after the airplane had gone, still listening for the scream of bombs coming down, his hands and arms and legs trembling uncontrollably.
So that gives a real vivid description of the place you were just at and the entrenching tool and stuff. I want to play you all now. It's our final interview with a veteran, an amazing man called John Carpenter. He recalls obviously his experience on Dunkirk beaches, and at the end he does get quite upset. All these years on, I think he was 98 when he recorded this video. And like a lot of men in the war, they didn't speak about their experiences till much later on in their lives. So it's upsetting to watch, obviously, because he's upset. But I think it's really important to show how, as Tom said earlier, that these things, how they affect people for their lives. And then we're going to talk about a little bit more about post-traumatic stress disorder, which is Tom's soldier character in the book is affected by himself, and Tom really sort of highlights in the book as well. So this is John Carpenter, a Dunkirk veteran, speaking now. Here we go.
All of a sudden, the retreat came on. And the officer said to us, "You are on your own as a retreat. You've got to get back onto the beach to get home." Because so many of them up the front, really right up the front, we was in the reserve, was captured. A lot of us got back, but we got back from where we were and walking and trying to get a bite, and every man was for himself. And we got to it, and the little boats from England was coming in, a fishing boat, a paddle boat, and the boys were swimming out, and every man was for himself, and I couldn't swim. So I sat down, my mate left me, and I sat down. It was chaos on the beach. I mean, there was lining up to get onto the boat, onto the ship. And then the next day, this is when one of the soldiers came up to me, a Scotsman. I said, "I can't swim." He said, "Come with me," he said, "I'll get you out." And this paddle steam had just come in. And in the meantime, of course, the mess of it was, you've got to take in consideration that how many of those troops were dismissed from the army because of nerves. It wasn't all the laughing game and the saying, "Hello, John." Some of them lost their nerve. And there's one fella, "I want to get home, he's nerve," and like that on the beach. But it upset me to see so many of those boys get killed like it. And I felt terrible when I got back. But people don't realise what we had to put up with on that beach. And,
this will tell a lot of people.
I wanted to get home, and I kept myself cheerful to, when I think about how many men was killed there. A lot of my friends was killed. A lot of them. And it was terrible. It did affect me. But I got over it when I got home.
And it's upsetting to watch, but it's important to see this and the effect of this man. I want to thank John Carpenter and his family there. Also, 9 News for allowing us to use that footage today. Tom, we've got a couple more school questions for you, and then we're going to sort of go towards the end of the program. But before we do, I know a lot of you have had to go off, but hopefully you'll get to watch this again. We've got about 4 minutes, and this is actually some footage from Dunkirk, the whole kind of Battle of Dunkirk. And I just wanted to sort of show you kind of the invasion, the soldiers, the planes and the miracle of Dunkirk, the little ships coming over. So if you're okay, Tom, we're gonna show a bit of that, and then we're going to come back with a couple more questions of Tom, and then we're closing for today. So watch is about 4 minutes of the Battle of Dunkirk. Here we go. There we go. Incredible, that, isn't it? Watching that. Yeah. Tom, we're going to have probably another question, and then we're going to have to sort of close, I think. But this is actually just about World War II, but also future works for yourself, really. So, Newton Farm Primary School, South Lanarkshire. Are there any other World War II themes you'd like to explore in future novels? Any other World War II locations or key events, for example? Any sort of thoughts about that? I mean, obviously there's probably thousands, isn't there? But I mean,
it's infinite, isn't it? Almost. I think Yeah, I think I'm working on something that's set in the Pacific, a bit of a shorter book, more of a picture book in some ways, that's set in the Pacific. So the war with Japan, I'm working on that at the moment, and other things come up all the time, like nothing. I've kind of like the next book I'm writing is probably going to be about the Iron Age, so it's a bit of a
leap.
But I think I need I think it's good to have a break from it. I think a bit of a break after the war, because that's about the Holocaust, and I think sometimes you just need to go easy on yourself a bit, because it is tough, isn't it? Like studying these things, and to give yourself a perspective and not to get desensitized to them. It's important to step back and do some football.
I'm just putting the program together and looking at different clips. It's really moving. It really gets.
I can tell it's emotionally affecting you as it does me, and hopefully it is. If it doesn't emotionally affect us creating these programs and these books, it's not going to affect you emotionally, and I'm sure it is. Just now, like the main thing I'd like to say is thank you to you. I think the way you put these programs together, and I know you work with other authors, I think it's excellent what you do as a showcase for authors. And I know I do, and I know other authors really appreciate the amount of work and research and effort you put into these programs, which bring our books to life and make them accessible to children. So thank you. We really appreciate it.
Well, that's very, 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 very kind. But I mean, as I said, you need a good book to start with. You know what I mean? So it's really helpful. Angel of Grasmere, Angel of Grasmere is out now. So we're going to say goodbye to Tom. Tom, give us a wave goodbye. Thank you very much, Tom. The dog's in on it as well. So there we go.
From
Tom,
Finn as well.
Nice to speak to you as always. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you. Bye bye. So that's Tom there. I'm just going to, we're nearly closed. We've just got a few minutes left. As I said, we might go slightly over time, but I just want to give you some stats from Dunkirk over here. So 338,226 soldiers were evacuated from Dunkirk between the 27th of May and the 4th of June 1940. 68,111 men of the BEF were captured or killed during the Blitzkrieg retreat and evacuation. 80,000 British and French troops were taken into captivity when Dunkirk fell. So we're going to close in a moment with some footage of Tom walking around the Dunkirk Memorial, which has all the names and the graves of those soldiers that did fall there. Before we go, I'd like to close. It's just literally a paragraph from Tom's books I'd like to read, end on a note of hope. Okay, and this is Peter, Tarn, and Eric all speaking together. And this is what Peter says. Peter says, anyway, Peter went on, someone in the village said it was a miracle. A miracle, Tarn laughed. Eric was suddenly animated. My mum told me that in bad times, miracles happen. When people are suffering, God sends us signs to remind us that he loves us. And that's kind of really runs through that sense of hope and kindness and a wider kind of sense of who they all are in this story. Angel of Grasmere, of course, is about war, and it's about the effects on children, on families, on soldiers, communities. But as we sort of said earlier, it's also a book about kindness and courage and hope and friendship. And all this is brought to life with such care and compassion by Tom in this book. And as the tagline goes, in the darkest days, that's when the miracles begin. So thank you to him. Thank you to all of you. And thank you to our veterans for obviously their service and their candid kind of interviews there in the war. We're going to finish now, I said, with some footage of Tom at the Dunkirk Memorial, and then some closing pictures of Dunkirk to finish. But for now, thank you so much for watching. You've been watching Mr. Dilly's World of History, Dunkirk commemoration special, Angel of Grasmere with the wonderful Tom Palmer. My name is Mr. Dilly, and it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from me. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.